Good. So I want to speak about the vision of Pope Francis. That might make you think I'm going to go through the whole of his nearly a year of teachings, and I'm not. And I wanted to talk about Evangelii Gaudium, and again that might make you think I'm going to go through the whole of that exhortation, which I'm not, because I think the Evangelii Gaudium is the key to understanding, to condensing the vision of Pope Francis. But all I'm going to do now is just look at the introduction and the first chapter, because that is the theological vision, I think, which helps us to make sense of the rest of the exhortation, and in fact helps us to make sense of everything that Pope Francis is doing. And the key there is this understanding of the Church's missionary transformation. That's one of the phrases that he uses, of how the whole point of the Church is not just self-preservation or protection, but actually going out to others in love and service and mission. So there's lots of things in general, and particularly in this exhortation, that I'm not going to talk about now. But I mean, just to look at some of the section headings of the exhortation, there are critiques of the market economy. There's wonderful passages about inequality. There's soaring critiques of urban life. I don't think Pope Francis likes cities very much. Discussions about popular piety, a great defence of the meaning of popular piety. A big section on the homily. Have you read that? The importance of the homily, and very, very concrete tips on how we should and shouldn't preach as priests and deacons. Lovely passages really important passages on social teaching, on the place of the poor, on the concern for the vulnerable, on the common good, on faith and reason, interreligious dialogue. You could go on, and it really is a map of many key issues in the life of the Church and the life of the world. But I say that in the introduction because I'm not going to talk about them now. Okay, I'm going to park all of them and just look, as I say, at the introduction and the first chapter, which is really the heart of Pope Francis. It's the interpretative key, the hermeneutic key to everything else that follows, and actually I think everything that Pope Francis has done in the last 10 and 11 months. So I'll just read a few wonderful passages and gloss them and give a bit of background information to some of them. The first line of Evangelii Gaudium: the joy of the gospel fills the hearts and lives of all who encounter Jesus. Those who accept his offer of salvation are set free from sin, sorrow, inner emptiness and loneliness. With Christ, joy is constantly born anew. In this exhortation I wish to encourage the Christian faithful to embark upon a new chapter of evangelization marked by this joy. And in paragraph 3, I invite all Christians everywhere at this very moment to a renewed personal encounter with Jesus Christ. So joy. It's a letter about joy. It's Pope Francis saying that he wants joy, Christian joy, to characterise his pontificate. And it's saying more than that. It's saying that the fundamental characteristic or virtue of the Christian as we go out into the world should be a spirit of Christian joy. It's the animating spirit. So there it is. It speaks for itself, although we're going to unpack what it means. And you see straight away he goes from joy, almost a kind of abstract thing, to a renewed personal encounter with Jesus Christ. Now that language of personal encounter might make some Catholics slightly uneasy, or maybe uneasy is too strong, but just a language that isn't their natural spiritual language, the language of their spiritual reading, their preaching, their normal sermons. It might sound very evangelical, which of course it is in the best sense, as if it's an evangelical Christian coming to us and saying, have you had a personal encounter with Jesus Christ? Have you been stopped in the street and someone's asked you that? Yes? Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? And of course you say yes, I hope, but it's not the frame that you would normally put round your own Catholic Christianity. But just to remember that this language of personal encounter, it's very much a part of the Catholic tradition, and it was very, very much a part of Pope Benedict's teaching. Yeah? Especially in the year of faith. Really, in one sense, all that Pope Francis is doing in these early passages of Evangelii Gaudium is reaffirming what Pope Benedict said in the year of faith. And he used exactly this language. We need to deepen our personal encounter with Jesus Christ. And just to go way back from Pope Benedict to the Scriptures, because we had the Feast of the Presentation recently, didn't we? This is the theology of the presentation of Simeon, isn't it? Yeah? Jesus is presented in the temple, and Simeon says, "At last, my eyes have seen your salvation." My eyes. Not just I have come to understand, or I know it's true. That's all true as well. But Simeon, a kind of almost an icon of the Christian who has a personal encounter with Jesus Christ and is renewed and inspired by that. My eyes have seen this salvation. So joy, just other little passages. Paragraph 5. The gospel, radiant with the glory of Christ's cross, constantly invites us to rejoice. Bit later on in the same paragraph. His message brings us joy. A quote from St. John's Gospel, one of the key passages really. Jesus says, "I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." It's good to remember that passage, isn't it? Yeah, because we might react and say, well, hang on, joy and happiness, that's not the heart of the gospel. The heart of the gospel is love and going to heaven and salvation, and of course those things are true. But Jesus' frame here, why have I come to you? Why have I spoken to you? It's so that my joy may be in you. He's almost saying this is the primary purpose. This is the fundamental goal of the creation of humankind, of the salvation that I've come to bring you. It's so that you can share in my joy, and so that, this is a beautiful piece of theology, so that your joy may be complete by sharing in the joy of Jesus and in the joy of the Blessed Trinity. And just the punch here from Pope Francis, he sets out all his theology, and then he speaks in that very Argentinian way from the heart. He says, there are Christians whose lives seem like Lent without Easter. Come on in.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. No, don't worry. You're welcome. Isn't that nice and provocative and challenging? There are Christians whose lives seem like Lent without Easter. Now, there it is. Joy, blah, blah, blah. We all know it's true. But what's the critique? Well, the critique is, hang on, Pope Francis, we're not all buzzing around like happy babies all the time. Life is hard, get real. You know, that's the critique. But let's listen to Pope Francis, because straight away he recognises this. He says, paragraph 6, I recognise, of course, that joy is not expressed the same way at all times in life, especially at moments of great difficulty. I understand the grief of people who have to endure great suffering. So he says, I recognise the ups and downs of joy. I know people are suffering. I know the meaning of grief. So it's not a superficial joy. He's not being flippant. He's not being superficial. It's not a mood. He actually qualifies it, and he goes on to say, yet slowly but surely we all have to let the joy of faith slowly revive as a quiet yet firm trust even amid the greatest distress. So it really is the joy of the saints that he's talking about. How can we let the joy of the Holy Spirit revive us, permeate us even when we're in great suffering. And it reminds you probably of all these very profound theological debates about how Jesus on the cross can still have the beatific vision, which is part of our Catholic faith, isn't it? And in what sense does the joy, the infinite joy of the beatific vision pervade and touch his humanity, his heart, his soul, his mind? It certainly does somehow, but what does that mean? I think we have to look to the saints. And just to remind you again that this isn't just Pope Francis, here is Pope Benedict, quoted by Pope Francis. Pope Benedict says, "Being a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty ideal, but the encounter with a person which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction." Encounter. Personal encounter. Pope Francis and Pope Benedict. Okay, so there's the joy. Well, where does that lead you? Well, the next passage is here. Paragraph 9, very simple, philosophical, not a Christian point this, philosophical point. Goodness always tends to spread. Goodness naturally diffuses itself. And then to make that a little bit more theological, to bring that philosophical dictum into a Christian theological perspective, Pope Francis writes, he actually quotes a passage that says, "Life grows by being given away." Life grows by being given away, and it weakens in isolation and comfort. It's double-edged. It's not just life grows by being given away, we need to learn to be more generous and loving and sacrificial, etc. That's true. But it's, if we think it's possible just to stand still or to hold on, it's not. Because in our isolation and comfort, life, faith, will actually weaken. And he quotes again, I'll tell you about the quote. He quotes here, "Here we discover a profound law of reality, that life is attained and matures in the measure that it is offered up in order to give life to others. This is certainty. This is certainly what mission means. Life is attained and matures in the measure that it is offered up in order to give life to others." This is just the gospel, isn't it? Anyone who saves his life will lose it. Anyone who loses his life for my sake and the sake of the gospel, for the sake of others, will save it. Not just we often read that in a reward-punishment sense, don't we? Yeah. If I want to save my life and be rewarded and go to heaven, I need to give my life now. But this is more profound. I'm not saying more profound than the gospel. I'm saying it's the deepest meaning of the gospel, which is the saving our life is the losing of our life. The giving up our life for the other is the true discovery of the meaning of human life. This is, again, nothing more than what Pope Benedict said in his first encyclical, Deus Caritas Est, yes? That wonderful meditation on the relationship between eros and agape. Erotic love, meaning, in the broadest sense, a love of consummation, of possession, of union, which is beautiful. But it defeats itself if it doesn't become an outgoing, sacrificial love. The love of agape, the love that is prepared to give itself up for the other. And we're always going back and forward between eros and agape, between erotic love in its broadest sense and charity, between possession and dispossession, between union and sacrifice. There's always the to and fro. This is, again, in one sense, it's not Christianity, these are philosophical dictums. Love is to seek the good of another. That's not a Christian motto, but it is at the heart of the Christian tradition. And these beautiful quotes that I've just given you, quoted by Pope Francis, they're from the Aparecida document. Some of you have heard of that. This is the document prepared by the bishops' conferences of Latin America and the Caribbean, that they would have a big meeting and a reflection and prepare almost like a mission statement for the continent of Latin America and the Caribbean. And Cardinal Bergoglio in 2007 had a key part in the drafting and the writing of the Aparecida document that came out representing the vision of mission for the continent. So it shouldn't surprise us that some of these ideas developed there are brought into the teaching of Pope Francis here. And all of that, those wonderful quotations there about life being given away, are in paragraph 10. Now, the joy of the gospel, giving our life for others, but the question comes then, to whom? Who are we reaching out to? What are we giving ourselves to as a church, as individual Christians? Well, here Pope Francis, like a good pope, is referring back to the synod, because part of this document is looking back to the synod on the new evangelization. And I won't say a lot about this. This is well-trodden territory. He simply says, as the synod does, as Paul VI did, and John Paul II did, that more or less there are three broad areas of mission. There's ordinary pastoral ministry to Catholic believers, to the faithful. There's reaching out to the baptized whose lives do not reflect the demands of baptism. That's the nice phrase, yes? Which is all of us, actually, but yeah, whose lives do not reflect the demands of baptism. In shorthand, in old-fashioned Catholic language, the lapsed. Right? This isn't strict, but so we've got the faithful, the regular faithful, those that we know. We've got the lapsed, the baptized, those on the edges. And third, we cannot forget that evangelization is first and foremost about preaching the gospel to those who do not know Jesus Christ or who have always rejected him. Who do not know him, those who've never heard of him, or those who've always rejected him, which could include lots of atheists in the UK, lots of people of other religions. They've heard about Jesus, they celebrate Christmas in this secular world, they've got glimpses of the gospel and of Jesus, but it's never become real enough to be an option for them, or they've had a look and they're not interested. All of them, says Pope Francis, have a right to receive the gospel, singular, and Christians, paragraph 15, have the duty to proclaim the gospel without excluding anyone. So we're getting into the sort of hardcore message here. Our responsibility is to proclaim the gospel without excluding anyone. And actually, going on to quote John Paul II, Pope Francis is just saying, I am in the tradition of recent reflection on mission here. It was Pope John Paul II that says, this is the first task of the Church. So if we've got those three groups, the first task of the Church is to proclaim the gospel. Missionary outreach is paradigmatic for all the Church's activity. We cannot passively and calmly wait in our church buildings. That's a quotation from Aparecida again. You see the kind of edge here. Okay, we all know we should be missionaries, we all know we should proclaim the gospel, but the edge here, getting a bit more concrete, is this is not just one of the things we do. It's the paradigm. It's the heart of what we do. And then making it a bit more real, we cannot passively and calmly wait in our church buildings. We have to, as it says in paragraph 20, moving forward, go forth. And this is a very simple language, isn't it? Go forth. But it's beautiful the way Pope Francis elucidates it. He looks at just some of the biblical models. Abraham is called to set out for a new land. Moses heard God's call saying, "Go, I send you." And in our day, Jesus' commandment was not just make disciples, but go and make disciples. We forget the go sometimes, don't we? We all want to make disciples, but part of the message there is the two letters in English, go. You have to go out and make disciples, go forth. And here's that phrase that you've heard many times right from the first days of Pope Francis's pontificate, the language of the periphery, the margin. Paragraph 20. All of us are asked to obey his call to go forth from our own comfort zone in order to reach all the peripheries in need of the light of the gospel. Peripheries, margins, outskirts. There was a lovely phrase in one of his early sermons, wasn't there, about calling us to go to the existential outskirts of our cultures and our societies, which I thought was a beautiful phrase, me being into existentialist philosophy. Yes, go out to not just to the geographical periphery. The periferia in Italian is the ring road, the inner ring road of a city. Yes, so he's saying in that Latin language, go out to the geographical, the edges, certainly the sociological edges, but go out to the existential edges. The people that are on the edges, the places that are on the edge. They might be very, very close to us, but they're peripheral, they're marginal. The Lord said, "Let us go on to the next towns that I may preach there also." Jesus is always moving. He has a bit of time, but then it's the next town. Now Paul stays somewhere, doesn't he? He stays for 3, 6, 9, 12 months to bed down and mature and catechize. But Jesus doesn't. The next town. How important a phrase that is theologically. And paragraph 22, the Church has to accept the unruly freedom of the word, which accomplishes what it wills in ways that surpass our calculations and ways of thinking. Unruly freedom of the Word of God. Cannot be ruled. It rules. God reigns. It's his kingdom. The Word rules, but from our perspective, because we want to rule, the Word of God seems unruly. And then, making it very concrete, it's vitally important for the Church today to go forth and preach the gospel to all places, on all occasions, without hesitation, reluctance or fear. Going forth. And paragraph 24, the Church which goes forth is a community of missionary disciples. They boldly take the initiative, go out to others, seek those who've fallen away, stand at the crossroads and welcome the outcast. Let us try a little harder to take the first step and to become involved. They're actually very gentle words, I think, from a pastor. Kind of thing a bishop would say to us, a parish priest. It's not hectoring, it's just saying, look, we're meant to be reaching out to people. We're meant to be at the crossroads, not at the cul-de-sac. We're meant to be at the crossroads, and a very gentle thing from the heart of a shepherd here. Let us try a little harder to take the first step and to become involved. Paragraph 25, he just reinforces this, and you can see some of the language here, and some of the things that niggle him. Mere administration can no longer be enough. Throughout the world, let us be permanently in a state of mission. And this is not new, is it? Yeah. How long ago was that book, what was it called? Mission or Maintenance, or Mission versus Maintenance. What was it called? Do you remember this book? It was a sort of key book 20, 30 years ago. And there's the phrase, as Christians in this country, are we interested in maintenance or mission? Now, you might say both. And I think Francis would say both. But all he's saying is mere administration cannot be enough. We need more than just keeping the machine of parish life going, of the maintenance. And this is where it gets very challenging. Because with all that vision about joy and going out, he says, how does that really apply to you, to your parish, to your priesthood, to my Newman House community, to the chaplaincy that I'm involved in the university in London here, to your own ministries with ordinariate groups or with parish or diocesan groups. So as I'm speaking, apply that to your present situation. I dream of a missionary option. That is, this is paragraph 27. I dream of a missionary impulse capable of transforming everything so that the Church's customs, ways of doing things, times and schedules, language and structures can be suitably channeled for the evangelization of today's world rather than for her self-preservation. Bang. That's the real meat of this exhortation. A missionary impulse capable of transforming everything. Not that you transform it for the sake of it, or you throw the baby out with the bathwater, or that you pretend you can rip everything up and start from scratch. You can't. But Pope Francis is saying very simply, when you look at your ways of doing things, and he gets very concrete, your timetable, your schedules, your language, your structures, when you look at what is actually happening in your Christian community, is this for the sake of self-preservation, or is it for the sake of mission? And if it's only for self-preservation, you need to have the courage to rethink it. And he goes on, the renewal of structures demanded by pastoral conversion can only be understood in this light, as part of an effort to make them more mission-orientated, to make ordinary pastoral activity on every level more inclusive and open. So he wants to shake us up. This is again, are we involved in maintenance alone or mission? Or maintenance for the sake of mission, which maybe is a reasonable compromise. What is really serving the life of the Church? What is serving this mission? And not to... He goes on, thank goodness, to then praise the work of parishes. So just when you think he's kind of asking us to leave everything and knock our churches down and tear everything up and go out naked like St. Francis into the streets, and you're thinking, well, hang on, what's the reality of me caring for the 1,000 souls that come to Mass every Sunday in my parish? He goes on in paragraph 28 to praise the parish, the local community. He says the parish is not an outdated institution, but precisely because it possesses great flexibility. So the parish is, he says, the Church living in the midst of the homes of her sons and daughters. We do need to be there. We need to be geographically present. We can't just all wander around like itinerant missionaries. We need a presence. The presence of the Church in the local community is the parish, but the parish itself has enormous flexibility as long as we are thinking about the structures of the parish. Are they truly serving people? Are they truly serving the mission of the Church? And he goes on to talk about different institutions within the Church, basic communities, small communities, the role of the bishop, the role of the papacy. And his point in paragraph 33, to sum up, is, I invite everyone to be bold and creative in this task of rethinking the goals, structures, style and methods of evangelisation in their respective communities. He's not being destructive. He's not saying tear it all up for the sake of it. He's saying, please have the wisdom to remember what it's all about, just to remember what the gospel is, and the courage to rethink as a community whether your life together, your parish life, your chaplaincy, your ordinariate, is actually serving the mission of the church, serving souls, reaching out to others. So, I'll jump ahead here. There are some very important points. In fact, the next part 3 from paragraph 34 onwards is about the kerygma, really. You've heard lots of discussion about this. Francis has been quite provocative in saying we need to focus on the core message of Christianity, the love of God in Jesus Christ, so that everything else around it can make sense to people in the light of the core message, the kerygma. Not to dump all our other doctrines and traditions and customs and the moral life of the church, but in order to help people to see the deepest meaning of our doctrines and our traditions and our biblical Christian morality, to open up the central message of Christianity, the love of God in Jesus Christ. So I won't talk about that. That's paragraph 34 onwards. But it's a very important part of this chapter. Now, let me finish with paragraph 49, which is a summary of everything I've been saying and Pope Francis has been saying. And if you read nothing else, if you do nothing else after this talk, yes, just go back and put paragraph 49, print it out and put it on your fridge. Yeah? If nothing else. And in fact, I'm going to read this. It's a paragraph. It'll take a minute to read, but let me read it and then give a final comment. Paragraph 49. Let us go forth then. Let us go forth to offer everyone the life of Jesus Christ. Here I repeat for the entire church what I have often said to the priests and laity of Buenos Aires. I prefer a church which is bruised, hurting and dirty because it has been out on the streets, rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own security. I do not want a church concerned with being at the centre, and which then ends by being caught up in a web of obsessions and procedures. If something should rightly disturb us and trouble our consciences, it is the fact that so many of our brothers and sisters are living without the strength, light and consolation born of friendship with Jesus Christ, without a community of faith to support them, without meaning and a goal in life. More than by fear of going astray, my hope is that we will be moved by the fear of remaining shut up within structures which give us a false sense of security, within rules which make us harsh judges, within habits which make us feel safe, while at our door people are starving and Jesus does not tire of saying to us, "Give them something to eat." Isn't that powerful? Yeah? So, he's repeating what he said. This is our mission. The gift of the gospel that we've been given. It's for others. And you can feel this in Pope Francis. He's saying, my heart is breaking because people don't know Jesus Christ. He's very much a missionary. He's not just saying, he's got wonderful passages about serving the poor later on, but he's not just saying go and meet the material needs of the poor. That's part of our mission in Christian charity. His heart is breaking here because, as he says, people don't have the consolation of friendship with Jesus Christ. And more than that, they don't have a community of faith to support them. That's the mission of the church. That's what our lives as Christians is all about. That's what drives and motivates Pope Francis. And he says very honestly, I know there are risks in this. I know there are risks. I know it's dangerous. I know we might lose something on the way. I know when you've got things well established, you don't want to ruin them. But he says the risk of not going out to help these people who are longing for the gospel is far greater than the risk of the little bit of danger and harm that might come to us by doing something new and rethinking this. In other words, there's no option that is risk-free. And the greater risk is not going out, not rethinking, not challenging what we're doing. And I know that you, the church, and possibly you in individuals, will become, in his phrase, bruised, hurting and dirty because you've been out on the streets. But I'd rather you were hurting, bruised and dirty with others, with them being brought the light of the gospel, than, he doesn't say this, than clean, peaceful, unhurting and unbruised in the security of your own communities. So, I would add my own gloss here. There are risks. Especially today, you might say, and perhaps you're right, people aren't strong enough to go out. People need, Christians, Catholics, they need building up. They need a greater sense of identity. They need stronger catechesis. They need formation. And this is undeniable. But again, I think Pope Francis will come back and say, yes, do the formation, do the building up, do the community building, as long as very soon you're wanting to go out in mission. And that you don't get trapped in the community building as if you're just creating another group that's inward looking, or even worse, a clique or a ghetto. These are the dangers. So he's speaking to us as a church as a whole. He's speaking to us as parish communities. He's speaking to us as priests here today. He's speaking to the ordinariate. He's speaking to me in the university chaplaincy. Go forth, go out. Have the courage to rethink what you're doing. Good.